October 1874. HMS Pearl, a Royal Navy schooner doing survey work off Newfoundland, logs something in the official record that should have changed everything. The crew watches a massive cephalopod surface near the ship. Over 50 feet long, tentacles thick as the ship's mast. They observe it for several minutes before it goes back down. The captain signs the report. The Admiralty files it with all the others. And that's where it sits, for over a century, alongside hundreds of similar reports. Not tavern stories, not drunken sailor bullshit, official naval documents describing creatures that, according to every scientist in London and Paris, couldn't possibly exist. Here's the thing though, they did exist. The Kraken was real. Giant squid are real. Colossal squid are real. And the world's navies had been documenting encounters with them for 200 years, while scientists called their officers liars. It took until 2004 for a Japanese research team to finally get one on film. 2004. This is the story of how the Kraken went from myth to confirmed species, and what it tells us about the massive gap between what sailors were seeing and what science was willing to believe. So why were naval officers writing official reports about sea monsters while scientists dismissed them as idiots? You need to understand what the ocean was in the 1700s and 1800s. Unknown. Completely unknown. Humans had been sailing on top of it for thousands of years, but beneath the surface? We had no fucking idea what was down there. The deepest a human could dive with 19th century tech was maybe 200 feet before the pressure killed you. The ocean goes down over 36,000 feet. Do the math. That's 99.5% of the ocean's volume completely inaccessible to human observation. And into this vast unknown, thousands of ships sailed every day. Merchant vessels, warships, whalers, research expeditions. Millions of square miles of ocean. And occasionally, something came up from the depths. Something huge. Something with tentacles. The men who saw it wrote it down, submitted reports, and got quietly dismissed as superstitious drunks. Because scientists who'd never been to sea had already decided giant cephalopods were impossible. The physics didn't work. The biology was wrong. Therefore, the creatures didn't exist. Didn't matter what the ship's logs said. Science had spoken. But the reports kept coming anyway. 1782. French warship reports a tentacle thick as a barrel wrapped around the bowsprit off the Azores. 1802. British merchant ship encounters what they call a monstrous squid, estimated at 60 feet in the Indian Ocean. 1813. Royal Navy frigate logs a cephalopod larger than the ship's longboat in the South Atlantic. 1848. HMS Daedalus reports a serpent-like creature that historians now think might have been a giant squid at the surface. Each incident documented, each report filed, each account ignored. The French Navy actually took this stuff more seriously than most. In 1861, the corvette Alecton ran into a giant squid off the Canary Islands. This wasn't some distant sighting. They got close. The crew tried to capture it, shot at it with rifles, got ropes around it, started winching it up. The ropes cut through the soft tissue and the thing tore apart. Only the tail section made it onto the deck. Captain Bouillet submitted a detailed report with sketches. They preserved the tail section. Scientists examined it and confirmed, yeah, this is a cephalopod of extraordinary size. But instead of admitting sailors had been right all along, the establishment treated it as a weird anomaly. One unusual specimen didn't mean giant squid were real. Then Newfoundland happened. Between 1870 and 1880, giant squid just started washing up there. Multiple specimens, tangled in fishing nets, found floating dead. Suddenly, scientists had actual bodies they could measure and dissect, and the measurements were insane. One specimen from 1878 measured 55 feet total length, tentacles over 35 feet, eyes 10 inches in diameter, beak the size of a human fist. This wasn't folklore anymore. This was biology you could touch. In 1873, Reverend Moses Harvey in Newfoundland got hold of a specimen and photographed it. The photo shows Harvey standing next to a giant squid tentacle draped over a rail. The tentacle is visibly longer than he is tall. He wrote papers, sent letters to European naturalists, basically forced the scientific community to pay attention.
Slowly, grudgingly, they started admitting, fine, giant cephalopods are real. But here's where it gets weird. Even after science accepted giant squid existed, even after they had specimens in museums, scientists still insisted many of the naval reports were exaggerated. Because the largest confirmed specimen was about 60 feet, but naval records had accounts of creatures over 100 feet. Scientists said these were estimation errors, tricks of perception. Panic. The sailors saw something real, but didn't see it accurately. Then, in the 1920s and 30s, whaling ships in Antarctic waters started reporting attacks by cephalopods even bigger than giant squid. Whalers found sucker scars on sperm whales that were way larger than anything known giant squid could make. The spacing suggested something substantially bigger than Architeuthis dux. But without a specimen, scientists remained skeptical. The specimen showed up in 1925. A giant squid washed ashore in New Zealand that didn't quite match the known species. Stockier, heavier body, bigger eyes, thicker tentacles. But it was incomplete, poorly preserved. Not enough for definitive classification. More specimens kept appearing over the following decades, all from Antarctic waters, all slightly different. In 1981, a Soviet trawler caught a female in the Ross Sea off Antarctica. This one was intact enough for detailed study. Different species confirmed. Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, the colossal squid. Heavier than giant squid, with tentacles armed not just with suckers, but with rotating hooks. An apex predator of the Antarctic deep. The largest colossal squid ever recorded was caught by a New Zealand fishing boat in 2007. Ross Sea again. 33 feet long, over 1,000 pounds. But this was a juvenile. Marine biologists estimated adults could reach 45 to 50 feet and over 1,500 pounds. And the eyes. The eyes on the 2007 specimen were 11 inches in diameter. Largest eyes ever recorded in any animal. Scientists noted the eye size suggested it hunted in extremely low light at great depth. This wasn't a surface creature. This was an animal that lived in the abyss and only rarely came up. So back to those naval records. If adult colossal squid reach 50 feet and giant squid reach 60 feet, then those naval reports describing 50 to 70-foot creatures weren't exaggerations. They were accurate observations. The HMS Pearl crew in 1874 saw a giant squid. The French corvette in 1861 caught one. They were documenting real encounters with species science refused to believe existed. What about the really massive reports, though? The 1700s and early 1800s accounts describing cephalopods over 100 feet. Here's where it gets tricky. We don't have specimens that large. Never measured a cephalopod over 60 feet. But we also know these animals keep growing their whole lives. A giant squid that lives longer grows larger. In the deep ocean, where food is scarce but predation is less intense, it's theoretically possible for a squid to reach extreme age and extreme size. Marine biologists call these supersized specimens. There's also the observation problem. When a ship's crew sees tentacles at the surface, they're not seeing the whole animal. They see a portion and estimate total size. If you see a 30-foot tentacle thrashing at the surface and estimate the body adds another 30 or 40 feet, you're reporting a 60 to 70-foot creature. But if that tentacle is on a colossal squid whose body is actually only 20 feet, your estimate is high. Not because you're lying, but because you're extrapolating from incomplete data. But that doesn't explain all of them. There are credible reports from experienced officers of creatures whose visible portions alone were massive enough to suggest total lengths beyond anything we've measured. Are these accurate? We'll never know because the creatures weren't captured. But 60-foot giant squid and 50-foot colossal squid prove the basic claim. Yes, the ocean contains cephalopods large enough to match historical kraken descriptions. The first footage of a living giant squid in its natural habitat wasn't captured until 2004. A Japanese team led by Tsunemi Kubodera used a deep-sea camera with bait off the coast of Japan. The footage shows a giant squid attacking bait at 3,000 feet, tentacles wrapping around it, hooks on the suckers clearly visible. Estimated at 25 feet. First time in human history we filmed a living giant squid in deep water. 2004. After centuries of sightings, more footage came in 2012. Same team, same region. This one was at 2,000 feet and looked bigger. Maybe 30 feet. The footage is eerie as hell. The squid moves with this alien grace. Tentacles flowing through the water, massive eyes reflecting the camera lights. It approaches the bait, investigates, attacks with shocking speed, then disappears back into darkness. You watch that footage and you understand why sailors who saw these things at the surface called them monsters. Because that's what they look like. The colossal squid has never been filmed alive. Every specimen we have was caught by accident or found dead. We've never seen one hunting in the Antarctic depths. Don't know how it moves, how it hunts, how it behaves. We have the body, but not the behavior. Somewhere in the Antarctic abyss right now, colossal squid are living lives we can't observe. Which raises a bigger question. How many other creatures in historical records are real animals science dismissed as myth? Sea serpent sightings. Could some be oarfish, which reach 50 feet and are almost never seen at the surface? Mermaids, misidentified seals or manatees? The massive sharks in medieval bestiaries. We know Megalodon existed, over 50 feet long. Went extinct 2.6 million years ago, but what if some survived? We have no evidence. But we also had no evidence for giant squid until we did. The Kraken legend itself is interesting. Earliest descriptions from Scandinavian sources in the 1200s describe a creature so large it was mistaken for an island. Ships would anchor on it, and the creature would submerge, drowning everyone. That's clearly myth. No cephalopod is that large. But embedded in the myth are real details. Tentacles, sucker marks on hulls, creatures capable of pulling boats underwater. These don't come from pure imagination. They come from observation, distorted through retelling but rooted in something real. The distinction matters. The legend describes an island-sized monster. The reality is a 50 to 60 foot cephalopod that lives deep and occasionally surfaces where sailors without biological training observe it. The legend is false, but the creature that inspired it is real. That's the uncomfortable truth about cryptids. They're not entirely myth. They're garbled accounts of real animals. This raises uncomfortable questions about how science works. For over a century, scientists dismissed giant squid reports because they conflicted with theory. Didn't matter that reports came from trained officers. Didn't matter they were in official logs. Didn't matter there were hundreds of them. Theory trumped evidence. Physical specimens washing ashore in Newfoundland finally forced revision, and even then it was grudging. Science presents itself as evidence-based and objective. The giant squid story shows science can be just as dogmatic as anything else. The naval officers who logged those encounters knew what they saw, wrote detailed descriptions, submitted them officially. Got ignored. Some got mocked. Some were accused of fabricating reports. Some saw their careers damaged because they wouldn't recant nonsense. And they were right. The creatures were real. Scientists were wrong. Took over 100 years for science to catch up. There's a human cost here. Sailors who reported giant squid truthfully got branded superstitious. Their accurate observations were treated as evidence of poor judgment. In a profession where judgment means life or death, that's not minor. That's career-ending. Some officers stopped reporting unusual sightings because they knew they wouldn't be believed. Which means we probably have fewer records than actual encounters because witnesses chose silence over ridicule. The Newfoundland strandings changed everything. Once scientists had bodies, the historical records suddenly got taken seriously. Researchers went back through old logs and Admiralty files, found hundreds of dismissed reports. Reading them now, knowing giant squid are real, you can see how accurate the observations were. Tentacle length, body structure, movement patterns. These match what we know about giant squid biology. The sailors weren't seeing monsters. They were seeing Architeuthis dux and Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni. What's remarkable is how little we still know. First video of a living giant squid, 2004. We've had specimens since the 1870s, but didn't see one alive in its habitat until 20 years ago. Colossal squid never filmed alive. Maybe a dozen specimens, all dead, all caught by accident. Don't know how many exist, don't know their range, don't know maximum size, don't know lifespan, don't know how deep they go. Still discovering basic biology of creatures we've known about for over a century. And if giant squid and colossal squid, which occasionally surface, were hidden until the late 1800s, what else is down there? The ocean is vast and mostly unexplored. We've mapped Mars's surface in higher resolution than the ocean floor, sent more people to space than to the deepest ocean. There could be large, intelligent, biologically significant creatures down there we have zero evidence for because they never surface and we can't reach where they live. The Kraken was real, not metaphor. The creature in naval records described as a massive tentacled sea monster was real. Architeuthis dux, reaching 60 feet, and Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni, weighing over 1,500 pounds, with tentacles armed with rotating hooks. These animals exist. They hunt in the deep ocean. And for centuries, sailors reported them while scientists said they were impossible. The Kraken story is about how dogma blinds us, how evidence gets dismissed when it conflicts with theory, how the ocean is larger and stranger than we want to admit. We like thinking we understand the world, that science has cataloged major species, mapped ecosystems, explained phenomena. Giant squid proves that's hubris. We're still discovering the ocean's largest predators, still finding creatures hiding in plain sight, documented in logs for centuries, waiting for us to believe our own records. HMS Pearl logged a 50-foot cephalopod in 1874. Crew described it accurately, captain signed. Admiralty filed it. For 130 years, that report sat as evidence of superstition. Until marine biologists confirmed, yeah, 50-foot cephalopods exist. Pearl's crew wasn't lying, wasn't exaggerating. They saw Architeuthis dux, wrote it down. We're right. Right now, somewhere in the deep ocean, giant squid are hunting. Colossal squid are navigating the Antarctic abyss with dinner plate eyes. And possibly, there are other species we haven't discovered, living at unreachable depths, growing to sizes we can only guess at. The Kraken was real. The ocean is still full of monsters. We just call them by scientific names now. The legend lives in official records, signed by captains, filed by governments, confirmed by science 150 years late. Some myths aren't myths. Some monsters are animals we haven't met yet. The ocean covers 70% of the planet and reaches depths we've barely touched. Still keeping secrets. The Kraken was one. How many others are down there, swimming through darkness, occasionally surfacing just long enough for a sailor to see and write down in a log no one will believe for another 100 years? The sea gives up secrets slowly. Sometimes takes centuries, but the secrets are real. The creatures are real. And the sailors who saw them and reported them and got called liars, they were telling the truth. The ocean was just better at hiding it than we were at finding it.